Good morning, my name is Anushka Guguri, and today I will be discussing American politics and climate change. The term climate change refers to long-term change in the average weather patterns that have come to define Earth's local, regional, and global climates, primarily due to the burning of fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas. Climate change is one of the most looming issues the world faces today, and as the effects of it become more visible, it becomes increasingly critical for the world to collectively take initiatives towards reducing carbon emissions in an effort to combat this phenomenon. While countries all across the globe must create change, most of the responsibility falls onto countries that are producing the most carbon emissions. Many of these countries have taken steps to reduce their negative environmental impact, but unfortunately, the US is not one of them. The US must take action as it is the country that has generated the most cumulative greenhouse gas emissions in the world since the 1750s. My argument is that the US is falling short in fighting climate change primarily due to its political climate. In the US, throughout the past decade, the spread of misinformation has risen, political polarization has increased, and the politicians from one political party of America have expressed more dismissal of the climate crisis than ever before. So why has the political climate of America shifted in the past decade? While there are many factors, a significant one is misinformation. The spread of misinformation has divided the political parties of America further than ever before, so much so that American citizens do not even agree on data anymore. Unfortunately, the amount of climate misinformation being consumed has reached substantial numbers. Between January to August 2021 on Facebook, the amount of climate misinformation viewed ranged from 827,000 times to 1.38 million times daily. Misinformation was not always as big of a problem in America as it is today. The amount of climate misinformation has grown, mirroring the growth in climate skepticism. Just in the year 2021, interactions for climate misinformation posts increased by 76.7%. A solution to preventing climate misinformation in America, consequentially lowering the number of climate change deniers, is prebunking. Prebunking is the process of debunking lies, tactics, or sources before they strike by showing people how to identify misinformation before they actually consume it. The game Bad News was developed to study the effects of prebunking. People enter a simulation where they go on the internet and can only move on once they have identified information that is false, teaching them how to identify instances of misinformation before it actually strikes. The method of prebunking misinformation was proven to be largely successful, and the amount of misinformation identified compared to before playing the game dropped in every group tested, as can be seen by the smaller post-score shapes of believed misinformation compared to the bigger pre-score shapes in blue. The limitation to the solution is it would be difficult to expose everyone in America to this game, as some people may be unwilling to play. Additionally, it has not been tested if being able to identify instances of misinformation changes opinions already created as a result of previous misinformation consumed. The growth in misinformation has caused one of the main aspects of America's current political climate, political polarization. According to Pew Research, this means that ideological thinking is now much more closely aligned with partisanship than in the past. As a result, ideological overlap between the two major political parties of America has diminished. Today, 92% of Republicans are to the right of the median Democrat, and 94% of Democrats are to the left of the median Republican. This divide did not always exist. In 1994 and 2004, political values of the two parties were much closer together. Not only has polarization increased in America, but animosity towards the opposing party has escalated significantly as well. In 2016, 55% of Democrats and 58% of Republicans viewed the other party in deeply negative terms. This is a sharp contrast from the past. In 1994, only 17% of Democrats and 21% of Republicans viewed the other party in this way. This increase in political polarization is reflected in the attitudes American citizens held about climate change before and after the 2016 presidential elections. According to an experiment conducted observing the dynamic of climate opinions, after Donald Trump's election into office, Trump supporters became less likely to accept the reality of climate change, but non-supporters became more likely to believe that climate change is a real, anthropogenic, and a serious threat. The root cause of this polarization is group thinking. As divides in the US deepen, members of each party strive to reach conformity within their party to push their party's agenda regardless of personal opinions. It was concluded in a study the cultural evolutionary trade-off of ritualistic synchrony provided by College Board. Not only did synchrony suppress the initial urge to argue for one's unique opinion, it also suppressed the desire to continue to argue for one's own opinion, thereby reducing healthy group dissent. This finding can be explicitly seen in America today, as many Republicans oppose climate change to group with their party's opinions. These opinions are mainly set by politicians. In the past decade, Republican leaders have increasingly dismissed climate change, largely affecting their party members' opinions and feeding into the already polarized climate of American politics. One of the most prominent examples of this is former President Donald Trump. On June 1, 2017, Trump announced that the U.S. had withdrawn from the Paris Climate Accord, an international treaty on climate, for economic reasons. Trump had reversed countless environmental protections during his presidency, but leaving the Paris Accord was by far the most significant. While America is currently back in the Paris Accord, the possibility of a future president stepping out of it, just like Trump did, remains high. Antagonism towards climate change is not just a trend the former president follows, however. In the 117th Congress, climate change deniers comprised more than 1/4 of the total number of elected officials in Congress, all of them being Republican. This poses a serious threat to the future of our planet. Regardless of who's in office, it is now impossible to pass bills in America that will work towards a greener Earth as a result of climate change deniers blocking them. To put the numbers into perspective, currently 63% of America is represented by a climate change denier in Congress today. But why are politicians advocating that climate change is a hoax in the first place? The answer lies in the money oil and gas companies are contributing these leaders with. In 2020, oil and gas companies supplied $48.5 million to Republican politicians. Examples of these companies are ExxonMobil and Chevron. A solution to get America back on track to combat climate change is to end lobbying. While lobbying can have some positive effects, it influences laws and regulations through the use of money, regardless of these laws being good or bad. Lobbying is causing Republican leaders to take a stance against climate change, in turn causing their followers to do the same. By banning lobbying, Republican leaders would be forced to make decisions regarding climate change using data, potentially causing the U.S. to take much-needed steps towards fighting climate change. The limitation to the solution is that lobbying has always been a very big part of American politics as a result of sometimes bringing politicians awareness to important issues. Additionally, this means that getting rid of lobbying would be extremely difficult, and by the time it actually happens, climate change's effects may already be irreversible. While tackling climate change in America may seem impossible, it is important not to lose hope. The citizens of America simply must begin to form their own opinions rather than conform to their parties. Without this, the world may miss out on the help of the second largest emitter of CO2, making the battle to preserve an environment for future generations an even greater struggle. Here's my work cited. Any questions?
I do have 2 questions for you. First question, what evidence did you gather that you didn't use, and then why did you choose not to use it?
I gathered specific evidence on examples of Congress blocking climate bills, such as the Build Back Better Act, and I put it in my paper, but I chose not to incorporate it in my presentation because I didn't have time, and there are so many more examples, so I chose to make a more vague statement about them blocking just general climate bills.
Okay, and if you had more time, what additional research would you conduct related to this issue?
I would conduct more research on how the economics of climate change ties into it. So I would conduct more research on oil and gas companies and how a big part of America is involved in oil and gas companies and are working for them, and how that ties into the political aspect of climate change.